What's up everybody, it's Realistic with Realistic Productions doing another tutorial for SoundOracle.net. We're going to continue on with the fundamental series, and what we're going to do is we're going to go over bass and bass lines today. This is going to have some similarities to the 808s, but there are going to be some different things to consider, especially if we're thinking about these going together with kick drums, and there's also some frequencies in the higher range that we're going to probably do a little bit different. And we're just going to focus on what's important about the bass line and maybe some things that we want to focus on cutting out. Alright, let's dive in.
Alright, so I got Pro Tools open up here, and as I always say, these tips and techniques will work in any DAW, so if you're capable of it, go ahead and open up your DAW of choice and do this along with me. You'll find that you learn a lot more if you do it along with me versus trying to remember it for later. Alright, so this week we're going to be going on to bass lines, and on this particular video I'm only going to focus on like electric bass, acoustic bass, not really the synth bass. I will do synth bass in a whole nother video, but I wanted to separate those two because they have different fundamental frequencies. You would EQ them differently, you would do different things to them, so I just wanted to focus on natural bass to start out with. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put some EQs on this stuff. And what we're going to focus on is the fundamental frequencies of bass line. So some stuff that you want to boost and cut. I got some stuff maybe for bass line that's maybe not the most fun to listen to, but there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of walking with it. Just some loops that I found in some folders that I had. So it's really going to be good for this example here. All right, so let's start, and I'll just kind of play a little what I got here. So just a little typical bass line, there's a little distortion on it. And to start out with is with bass lines, unlike 808s and synth bass, is you want to get rid of some of this stuff on the lower end here, because I'll show you that it's really just going to be more like extreme sub bass, more rumble than anything. And so you might want to actually just put some type of filter on it, because I'll show you what this sounds like. And it's usually between 20 and 50 hertz. That's just kind of more of a rumble. Right, so there's just a little bit of too much action going down there. I'll show you another one right here, another bass line. All right, so that's usually not going to be too beneficial when we're talking bass lines here. And so usually what I'll do is I'll get rid of that a little bit. And if you take a listen, you'll notice that I'm not really changing the sound of the bass too much. Now, typically, this is where I end the cutting for the bass line. Sometimes people will go way up here. I don't like to go that far because I do like a little bit of meat down in the bass. So this is usually where I'll cut. And you see we're not affecting it too much. All right, so let's continue on just focusing on some areas to cut for a little bit here. Another area too is between 250 and 300 hertz. I even would go up to maybe 500 hertz for this too. You're going to find a lot of like woofiness, some boxiness in this range. It just gets a little overbearing. You can hear how that's kind of boxy, kind of wobbly. And then let's work our way up a little bit. See how that's really getting muddy right there? Typically, that's worth cutting right there. Another area worth cutting, and this is also an area where a lot of times people will boost to get some punchiness and attack, but there is some areas in there that you might want to cut. So a lot of times the punchiness and attack of a bass will be between 100 and 200, but I do find in the lower hundreds that it gets a little bit too resonating as far as build up. goes, and it's usually between 100 and 110 where I find that problem with bass. Can you hear that build up at 105 versus over here? So that's typically an area that might be worth cutting right there. Just to avoid some type of buildup. All right, so now let's focus on some areas where you might want to boost. All right, so the deep bottom end, that boominess of the bass line, is going to be between 40 and 80 hertz. All right, and this one sounds like that bottom end might be a little bit more towards 70 and 80, but sometimes depending on how low that the bass player is playing, depending on what bass that they have, what type of bass they have, what brand, it might be different for each one. So let's just kind of scope through it I'll zero out so you can really hear it. So that's where we're getting some of that deep bottom end. And then I'll show you, we were talking about some of the punch and the attack. And like I said, it's between 100 and 200. Typically, I avoid the lower 100s just because there's a buildup usually that's going on there. But I'll show you a little bit here. See how we're starting to get a little bit more of a punch? All right, so another area to focus on when it comes to bass, and this is usually a surprise for a lot of people, especially a lot of people that are just starting out with mixing and everything, is really when it comes to bass lines, a really important factor is the 700 to 1K range. And this is where we're going to get a lot of the note attacks, the thump, we're going to feel some of that finger movement going on with the bass line, and so it's really important to maybe want to boost that area, and so I'll show you that. And actually I think one of these other ones has a little bit better example of that finger movement. So I'll show you here. Let's just take it all out here from the bottom. See how we're getting that finger movement? We're getting more of that note attack there. And let's go back here, and I'll show you on this one too. See, that's all things that you're going to want in there, because if you're trying to get this to cut through on cheaper speakers, lower quality speakers like iPhones, earbuds, maybe average home system, this is definitely something that's going to make the bass cut through. Down here is where people are going to feel the bass. Up here is where they're going to hear the bass. So you're definitely going to want that in there. And so let's just kind of show you some areas where you could kind of boost that a little bit. And just a little life hack on this. I am really a fan of the SSL EQ on this. You can use the waves or you can use the UAD version. I'm always more prone to jump towards the UAD version, just personal preference. But I'll show you how that sounds, and it just has a really nice cut to it. So just a little life hack, just in case you got either the waves or the UAD version here. And I'll show you how it really kind of cuts through. I'll actually show you a little bit more on this one because this bass line I feel had a little bit more of that finger movement. See how it just cuts through a little bit more, get that finger movement, and I'll just show you too versus like a typical EQ here, like one that's a little bit more transparent, like this Fab Filter one. Yeah, you can kind of just see how that's got a little bit more color to it right there when it comes to boosting. All right, so let's go back, focus on some other areas to consider for boosting as far as our fundamentals here. We have in this upper range between 2 and 5K, this is where you're going to find that slap sound from the strings. You're going to get a little bit more of the edge, a little bit more of the string attack up here. So I actually put a high pass on this to show you that. See, that's where you'll get a lot of that string movement too. So if you're trying to get a little bit of that slappy sound here, definitely worth boosting, and I'll show you more on this one that's got a little bit more of that finger movement. See, you can hear that the string movement right there a little bit. So let's boost in that area. Yeah, and so those are the fundamental frequencies of a bass line. And so hopefully you're getting a lot out of this. And just remember, like I've been saying in the other fundamental series, these won't work on every single bass line. They're not going to work on every single song. I mean, you might have the same style of bass and the same bass line in two different songs, and they might not work because you got to consider other things that are going on in the mix. But these are definitely some things that kind of get you going, some things to focus on. If you're looking like, oh God, how can I get this to punch through? How can I get a little bit more of that string attack? How can I get a little bit more thump to it? Now you know the general area to kind of start out with. And like I said earlier in the video, we will be doing a video just on synth bass. So if you're looking on something that's a little bit more synth bass, we will be having that coming shortly.
So I'm hoping that you got a lot out of this tutorial today. Hopefully there's some information that was useful. If you're getting a lot out of this but you want to see more, please feel free to comment below. Let us know what kind of tutorials that you want to see in the future, and Oracle and I can definitely make that happen. We're always trying to find the content that you want to see. If you're liking what you're hearing from me, you can find me everywhere on social media at Realistic Productions. You can find me at the web, realisticproductions.net. You can find my man SoundOracle everywhere at SoundOracle. And if you're looking for the best 808s, the best kicks, the best snares with the craziest loops and samples you can find on the internet right now, go to SoundOracle.net. All right, till next time.